Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm so glad you decided to join us to hear from these four amazing experts on these four relevant and current topics for your small to medium-sized business owners. My name is Trisha Stetzel. I am the owner of Results Extreme Business Solutions and a certified Focal Point business coach. Our Texas Leadership Network, which includes 11 coaches across Texas that are all Focal Point certified, are bringing this amazing event to you right now. So our four speakers, the first one being Jim Butcher with Allegiance Bank, is going to talk to us about the Payroll Protection Program, as well as some other relief programs that are out there for small to medium-sized businesses. Our second speaker is going to be Artie Byrne with RTEX Funding. He's going to talk to us about alternative lending. Where else can you get money from if you can't get money from the bank today? So it's really about creative lending. Our third speaker is Mark Mitford. He's the CEO of HR Catalyst Consulting, and he's going to talk to us about furlough versus laying off and what does that look like. And wrapping it up, I have Miss Trisha Burita with Burita Law Firm, PLLC, talking to us about sick leave, the FMLA, and the FFCRA. If you don't know what those are, tune in and check it out. We're so glad you joined us. I'm going to drop you right into hearing Mr. Jimmy Butcher from Allegiance Bank. Thank you.
11 o'clock this morning, so about 30 minutes ago, those funds are no longer available. However, with that being said, they're looking at passing a second funding, which is they're looking at approximately $250 billion, probably a little bit more. We'll see how that comes together, but most likely you'll be hearing more and more about that over the next day. The PPP and the EIDL program have been rapidly changing. So we're going to start with the EIDL and then we'll work on to the PPP. I just wanted to make that first announcement. So with that in mind, know that the funds that were appropriated for the PPP program have nothing to do with the EIDL program. So they're two separate funding sources. So if you had a EIDL loan, the funds are still available for that through the SBA. So the difference between the two is that the EIDL is a loan, whereas the PPP program is a forgiveness program. The EIDL loan, the way that works is that for whatever damages that you've had for this year, you're going to go ahead and apply directly through the SBA. When you make that application, after you get approved, up to $10,000 of that is granted to you, so it's given to you. So we've been highly recommending that everybody goes and does both loan applications. And we'll get into the PPP loan application as that just changed a little bit in a bit. So on the EIDL, you're looking at an interest rate approximately 3% up to 30 years. $2 million is the cap on that for economic damages. So if you've been affected by the corona outbreak, I would highly recommend you go ahead and apply for that. Any questions on the EIDL for the time being? You could just unmute yourself and we'll get, so that was pretty much it on that. And then we could move into the PPP. Questions?
I don't see anybody and there's nothing in the chat.
Okay. So the PPP, which is everybody's been most interested in, and the reason why they're interested in is that because it is a forgiveness program. The way it works is that you take your average payroll expense for 2019 and you multiply that, you divide it by 12 and then you multiply it times 2.5, and that's going to give you the number that you come out with. There is no restrictions for the PPP program. So sole proprietors, independent contractors, everybody is eligible to apply for that. The only ineligibility you have is if you are not a U.S. citizen and you do not live in the United States. But everybody else is absolutely 100% that they could apply for it. So what I said earlier is that the funds had ran out. However, with that said, I would highly recommend that you still get your application ready and prepare your paperwork, because the likelihood of there being a second tranche of funding is very, very high. And most likely that's going to happen within the next week. And you want to be prepared, especially for this time around, because I imagine there probably won't be a third time, but definitely a second time. Something you need to, that I've seen looking at these applications, is that question number 7 is a trick question. Okay, question number 7 on the application. Okay, let me read it to you just so you know. It is an automatic disqualification, and I've had to fix about 40 of them. So in the application, quick, application. So on the application, number 7, you kind of get in the mode of marking no on everything. And it says, number 7, is the United States the principal place of residence for all employees of the applicant, including the applicant's payroll calculation above? If you mark no, it is an automatic, you become ineligible for the PPP loan. So it's very, as you're reading through it, go ahead and make sure that you mark that correctly, okay? The second recommendation that we have, and this is the second part of the funding. So once you get the application in, the second part of it is going to be based on verification of who you are. We want to, especially if you're a non-bank customer, you want to be able to prove who you are. So you're going to be looking at, you want to have a current driver's license, of course. Most recent tax returns. If you have current tax returns and your company documentation, go ahead and put that all together right now, because you will be needing that. One thing that a lot of sole props have been having problems with is that they are, they're not in good standing, one, with the SOS, which will be a requirement for most banks. They need to be in good standing. 2, their financial statements need to be in working order. And the way that could be is they could either do their 2019 tax returns and have that completed, or they could have their 1099s with a draft 2019 tax return. Another way is by doing their P&Ls for the company or their sole prop independent contractor. They could have that also. I highly recommend that they hire a professional to get it done. And the reason why I do that, why I recommend that, is because it will streamline the process tremendously. A lot of the sole proprietors out there right now are, the way they're doing their financials is they're expensing a lot of things that, you normally do, right? You would expense out your car, you expense out things like that. That is a double-edged sword in this PPP application process. It's really going to limit the amount that's available to you, and because the calculation starts off of your net income for 2019. So make sure that as you talk to people or as you apply yourself, that you make sure that you take out what aren't normal expenses for the business and use the higher amount for that. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah, Jimmy, we did get a question that came in through the chat. The question is, for those people who have submitted their PPP paperwork but really haven't heard anything back, where do they fall in that funding pipeline?
So the way it works is, if you applied and you received a SBA loan number, the SBA has earmarked the money for you. That means that the funds are available for you, but you would have received a SBA loan number from your bank, okay? If you haven't, I would call them and see if they have the SBA loan number. If they don't, that means that you were not in this funding round.
Okay, so the key to knowing that you're in the pipeline is having that number. If you don't have that reference number, that's your first flag to say, maybe I need to follow up or push something.
Right, the SBA will send out a conditional approval letter, and that's basically saying that based on the bank's underwriting, that they are ready and able to fund that. And then, like I talked about earlier, you'll get into the verification part, which, that's why a lot of these banks went with current customers, because it's just easier to verify current customers because they've already been with you for a while, right? The banks on SBA.gov that do non-customers, those ones that a little bit more stringent process, It's not going to be horrible. They're really trying to get this money out to as many people as possible and help out. They truly are.
So, Jim, this is Paul Miller. So question, if I have applied, I know the application is at my bank. My bank's not asking, answering any questions. It's B of A, right? So, but I've heard nothing back except I know they have my application. Do I have to resubmit with the second tranche, or can I consider my application still in queue for consideration?
A lot of people ask me that, and there's a difference on differing on opinion. So my personal opinion as a business owner, and so you guys know my backstory, I actually lost a business in Hurricane Harvey, and I applied for these type of loans and never heard back. And then 4 weeks later, they sent a denial. So from my personal opinion, working at the bank, I don't see the issue of running a second application through, because the way the SBA system works is that it only accepts one application. So once you've been processed, you cannot, it will not accept your application from any other institute. So from that standpoint and from that position, I personally, I would file a second application, especially if they have not been responsive at all.
Another question came in. This one's from Anna, and it sounds like there's a spin-off industry developing. So she has a client who was approached by a quote-unquote consultant that offered to handle the application process for him and do everything for a fee of $2,500. Is this something that's really happening, and is it a bid?
There are consultants out there. I would stay with the known paths. Your CPA and someone that's trained to do the financial part of it. The consultant, it truly is a 2-page application. So you don't really, if your banker's not helping you, you don't really need a true consultant to really run you through the path. And that's my personal opinion. Anybody that asks for money up front too, it's, those are usually indicators that these are scams, in my opinion, too.
Okay.
All right, we have about a minute left if anybody has more questions for Mr. Butcher.
One thing I will say is don't be discouraged. If you have not applied or your clients have not applied, I would recommend that you go ahead and get lined up regardless, get your paperwork together, because there will be a second tranche, and a lot of people waited, because they didn't know how things were going to end up. So if you have any questions, put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me. Right now, I'm stuck in a cave doing paperwork for like the next 2 weeks. So, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I truly just want to be a resource for you guys and help in any way possible.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. And I know I let you off the hook today because you have so many things that you need to go do. So I apologize to the group here, but Jimmy does have to go get some work done. But if you still have questions for him as we go along, please put them in the chat. The chat will be saved, and we'll go back through that to answer any questions that come up after Jimmy leaves. Jimmy, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Remember those conditional approvals that people are waiting? That's what I got to get out, so they're not wondering what's going on right now. So,
thank you so much for being here. All right. Next up, I don't know why this changes volume every time I go to slideshow. All right, so next up, we're going to talk to Artie Byrne, and he's going to present us with some alternative lending thoughts and ideas. And I've asked the person who invited him, Mr. Chris Gay, who is part of our TLN, to introduce Artie. So Chris, if you'd introduce yourself first, and then introduce Artie, and we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. So Chris Gay in Austin, Texas. I've been with Focal Point for almost 5 years now. I have 30 years of small business experience in and around the Austin area in 5 different industries. And it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Artie Byrne. I have known Artie Byrne for almost 3 years now. And Artie does what they call alternative financing. And for those of you who are not familiar with that concept, Artie really picks up where the banks leave off. So if you apply for a bank loan or something like that and you get turned down, that's where people like Artie can step in and help. Artie has This is his second career. He spent 20 years climbing the corporate ranks and ended up as the worldwide vice president of sales for high-tech fiber optic semiconductor company before he decided to make a change and go to work for Ellis Arnson of Performance Capital in Houston, where he learned about invoice funding and accounts receivable factoring. He's been open since 2010. He offers a full catalog of loans against all classes of corporate assets to help companies that are having working capital and cash flow problems. Artex funding funds corporate lines of credits, term loans, factoring, and unsecured loans. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Artie Byrne.
Great
Welcome,
intro. Man, did you write that? That was excellent. Hey, any chance you have that one sheet I sent you? Maybe we put that up?
I don't have it handy.
Okay.
All right. Well, and that's okay, Artie. Why don't you just kind of describe to us what alternative financing is? Let's
Okay.
get started with that, because a lot of us don't even know what it is that you do.
Okay, no worries. So I'm known as a working capital asset-based lender. So I market myself to all the bankers. I always say go to the bank first, right? They're the lowest cost money out there. If you can qualify for a term loan or a line of credit for a bank, that's what, 5% money, 4%, 5% money. So I'm the alternative to the banker because I have different programs than they have. I do different underwriting. We're a lot more flexible, a lot more creative. All my money comes from private equity sources, hedge fund, private wealth sources, family offices. So we, in the good days, we have an unlimited amount of money because it's basically Wall Street money that we broker for various loan programs, either invoice funding, factoring, purchase order funding, various assets. So we only need one class of asset to get a company a loan. So what's different corporate assets? Anyone have any idea we might use or to collateralize a loan?
Real estate?
What about inventory?
Yes, inventory is great. Yes, thank you, inventory. What usually happens with inventory when you loan against inventory? I always like to say, what happens with inventory?
It walks out the door.
It walks out the door. So if you have inventory, what we do is we put it in a bonded warehouse so we control that inventory. Because remember, we've given you 50, 60, 70% of the wholesale value of that inventory. Inventory is usually free and clear. We put it in a bonded warehouse. We then UPC code your inventory and we release your inventory when you give us purchase orders from your customers. But again, it gives you working capital. This is all about working capital. This is all about bridge loans. We have programs that can do a bridge loan anywhere from 1 month to 4 years. That's all we do. We're the bridge. We're to get you out of the trouble, to get you back to the banks. And I've done that about 27 different times. A banker would call me, and you're talking Bank of America, Chase, BBVA, Compass, all the major multinationals, regionals, community bank. Today, when I hang up, when Hillcrest Bank wants to talk to me, they have a deal for me. So we can always get a company a term sheet for anywhere from short to medium term loan, and because we're more flexible. So our rates start from just above bank rates, 6% to whatever. We price for risk. So sometimes it's a higher priced loan, especially if we do an unasset loan and unsecured loan. We have the ability to do that just off of cash flow, just off of bank statement loans. So we have a lot of different lending property. So the next one, I talk a little bit about inventory. Inventory, as you say, we'll do 50, 60% of the value of the inventory in a bonded warehouse, so we control. What's another asset we might collateralize against?
We say real estate?
Anyone?
What's that?
Real estate, do we call that one?
Right, real estate. So I do, you know what hard money real estate is? Hard money loans?
I'll let you explain it.
Hard money is, it's industry vernacular. They call it a hard money because it's more expensive. You know, it might start at 8% and go to 17%. Again, it's a 6-month loan to a 4-year loan. It's quick though. A lot of the time, the beauty about hard money lending is we will close this loan in good days, you know, not in these days, but good days in 3 weeks. So, you know, someone comes in from California, they're going to buy a building that you want to buy. They might come in cash. You don't have the cash. You might come to us. Well, we have the cash. We'll loan you 60, 70, 80% of the value of the real estate. And all we really need is a personal financial statement from you, the borrower, maybe 1 year's tax return. So that takes care of you personally. And then on the real estate, I need an appraisal or a broker's price opinion. Anyone know what a broker's price opinion is?
No.
I see a bunch of shaking heads.
Yeah, okay. I like to keep it a little interactive so that way
Yes,
you don't
that's
all
good.
fall asleep and just listen to me drone on for the next 15 minutes. When I speak publicly, I do a lot of interactive talking. So, broker price opinion is a BPO. That means you hire a broker to give you an opinion of value. So he might give you a report, and it's cheaper and quicker and faster than an appraisal. These days, you need an appraisal. It's a 3-week wait time because everyone's trying to get their property appraised these days to try to figure out the value, how much equity they have, so they can loan on their real estate to get working capital. These days, we're going to get flooded. My phone is ringing off the hook because everyone is having cash flow problems. So that's really what a hard money loan is on real estate. It's quick, it's fast, it's flexible, a little more expensive. As I say, anywhere from 8% to 17%. And we even do land. We've done land, we've done warehouses, strip centers, buildings. Again, you need a quick, fast loan for a minimum of 6 months. We can loan you the equity off your building.
So Artie, I have a question for you. So since most people are not familiar with what you do and how you do it, who is a typical client for you? What does that look like?
Usually it's so when you come to a working capital asset-based lender, my 2 biggest clients are you're young and you're growing. So it means you're probably 14 months, 16 months, you know, the hockey stick. It's the knee of the hockey stick. See, the hockey stick curve is going up. So you're too young for a bank. You're not yet profitable. So if you're break even and you're growing and you have growth problems, cash flow problems, we will fund you. We like to say we'll fund companies that are 6 months old and $50,000 in sales. We do no pre-revenue funding. You have to be post-revenue, but you can be young. You can be young and growing, and we'll fund you. And we funded invoices and purchase orders and inventory for young companies. The other big client that we deal with is the company that's been in business for a while, and the hockey stick is flipped over, and you're actually going south. You're having issues, financial distress. Again, the bank will fund you. The bank might even be calling in your loan because you're not meeting your covenants. And you would come to us for a bridge loan to get you out of trouble. We even send in virtual CFO guys to help straighten you out. You have a question, Chris, I see?
I was just going to say, what advice or strategies can you offer business owners in today's difficult environment?
I would say cash is king. So first of all, look at all your debt. See if you can renegotiate all your debt with all your vendors and your landlord and everything. Hold on to your cash, okay? Because you know, yes, you have these PPP loans and these other things from the SBA, but if you don't need to take it, you know, if you can avoid going more into debt, do it. You know, some of the best companies we funded, is they bootstrapped it. They take minimal amount. You're taking a loan for a month or two just to get you over the hump. So that's my biggest
Artie, do
thing.
you typically work with just product type companies, or do you engage with service companies as well?
We do services too. See, services, a lot of times we'll do either a cash flow loan or you'll have invoices, because even service you have to invoice. So we'll, we do a lot of, it's mostly B2B companies. We do some B2C, but mostly it's B2B. $50,000 to about $10 million, our range. We have, we've done some large loans, some large bridge lending, stuff like that. The other big call I'm getting is purchase order funding. You want to get things manufactured in China, in Asia, in India, overseas, Vietnam, and you have a purchase order from a major Fortune 1000 company. On various companies right now, they need to get it out of the factory. So you probably have the 20–30% to initiate manufacturing for these Chinese factories, but you don't have the 70% to get this product out of the factory. So if we have a good purchase order, we'll actually pay that 70% for you. And you're trying to get a pen manufactured, let's say, and you have an order for 1 million pens. So the minute it leaves the factory, we actually own those 1 million pens because we put insurance on these, we take title to this asset, and we own it until thus time it reaches your distribution point or your warehouses and someone signs off on and approves that order and releases our insurance and our title to these goods. We inspect it. We have worldwide inspectors before it even gets out of the factory, make sure this pen is form, fit, function, looks perfectly, does to your plans, and we'll fund it for you and let you grow. It's funny right now, a lot of PO funding stuff going on.
That's great information, Artie. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Does anybody have, with Artie, does anybody have any general questions or even specific questions for Artie? Raise your hand, come off of mute, put it in the chat box.
Don't see any in the chat just yet. I don't see any waving hands. I think we're good.
All right, Artie, so give us a piece of advice. What should we be doing? I know that we need to have cash. I know that's a really big thing right now, but give us one thing that we should be doing right now as small business owners.
Right now, just stay calm. Don't panic. I would say go to the bank first. When this all ends, the bank can help you. Come to me, see if I can help you. I can get you a term sheet. You might be able to, work and help, and if I can ever help you. I have a lot of different alternative means, and good luck out there. I know it's crazy and scary. It's unprecedented time, but we'll make it through. You know what? We always do. And thank you for having me on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a couple of questions come in. Dennis, we've got a minute left, so go ahead.
We did. There are two questions here. One is how long to secure a hard money loan, and then the second is the range, the interest rate range for the different types of capital collateral.
The first one, what's that on hard money loan?
How long?
Oh, anywhere from 6 months minimum to 4 years. We'll do a hard money loan.
No, how long to secure it? How long to get the loan? Once
a month. These days it'll take me about a month.
Right.
Remember, a personal financial statement, 1 year tax return on you, and then an appraisal or a broker's price opinion or comparative market analysis, survey, pictures. We can get you a loan a month, I'd say.
Okay.
Hard money. What's the rates? It'll go from anywhere from 8% to 17% on a hard money real estate loan.
Very good.
Great.
Right.
Artie, thank you so much. I hope that you'll hang around with us to listen to the rest of the speakers
will.
and answer, if we have any time at the end, answer questions. And of course, for our audience, if you guys have questions or things come up, please put them in the chat. We are monitoring that and we can bring those up as well. So I'd like to move on to our next speaker. Share my screen again. Look, I'm going to get it right this time.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. Excellent.
All right, so what I would like to do, I would love Art, if you would introduce yourself and introduce your speaker. Art Locke is also part of our TLN, and he is a coach in the Dallas area, and he brought Mark Mitford to talk to us today about some HR stuff that we're all very interested in. So Art, if you'd introduce yourself and introduce Mark, that would be great.
Thanks, Trish. Hey, everyone. Hope you're all having a fantastic week. I am Art Locke, as Trish said. I am a coach with Focal Point, been a coach in the Dallas area for about the past 6 years. I focus specifically in the service sector. And so I'm going to introduce Mark. And before I do that, I just want to give a little shout out to Katie Lyman. Katie Wave, I think you're here online with us. Katie helped syndicate this webinar throughout North Texas. So I want to thank her for that and her company. VentureX Castle Hills, which is a co-work suites in the in northern Dallas area. Katie, thanks so much for helping us syndicate this. So let me introduce Mark. Really pleased to do this today. I've known Mark for about 3 years through various chamber activities and mastermind formats. Mark's a strategic leader and advisor in the HR industry. He's got over 20 years of experience as an executive in mid-size and Fortune 50 companies. And he's got a whole range of strengths from talent management, leadership development, performance management, culture improvements, compensation benchmarking, employee engagement, handling HR issues, especially with mergers and acquisitions, and so on, including succession planning. So he's really covered the territory in terms of key strategic and tactical HR functions. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in organizational psychology and an MBA in strategy and international management. And he's been the owner of his own HR consulting firm, HR Catalyst Consulting, since 2013, up here in the Dallas and Fort Worth area. He really focuses on small to mid-market companies and really helps them develop the HR strategies and platforms to drive continued growth. Mark's a great guy. He's got a great soul and a warm heart. I love working with him, as well as his wife, Melinda, great friends of mine. So let me turn it over to Mark Mitford.
Great. Thanks so much, Art. Appreciate it. And appreciate your network for being able to put this together. So yeah, so what I'd like to do today is just kind of walk you through a number of things. I know the title is around, just some different options, was furlough versus layoff. I wanted to go kind of expand on that just a little bit for everyone today on this Zoom meeting and this web session. So the key thing I would say for business owners, and again, I deal with businesses typically anywhere from about 25 employees to about companies around 300 employees, up to about 300 employees. So the key thing I would let business owners know, which a number of you are in attendance today, is if you think about it too, you have lots of tools in your toolkit around adjusting the overall cost within your organization. And one of the key things I talk about too, which is sometimes a little bit mind-boggling to think about, is that when you think about the overall cost within any organization, whether it's a manufacturing organization, professional services, etc., that your overall cost structure is probably anywhere between 50 to 75% based around your employee cost. So it doesn't, and again, this is somewhat industry agnostic, but manufacturing is probably a little bit lower on the maybe around 50% range, whereas your professional service is probably getting upwards to 60, 70, 75%. So most of your cost structure, your expenses, when you look at your balance sheet, are based around your employee costs. But the key thing to remember here, there are a lot of levers to pull when you are thinking about our tools. If you think about it, if anybody is pretty handy, and they have a lot of tools, and they have a lot of tools in their toolkit. Really, I want you to visualize kind of your toolkit or your levers you can pull within your organization to reduce the overall expenses, again, from an employee perspective. So I wanted to talk about a number of those with you today. And unfortunately, I've gone through my share, both in my corporate life, which was about 25 years or so, to my consulting life too, which is pretty popular, unfortunately, in a negative way sometimes with clients or friends of clients, and helping them kind of maneuver this through right now. So again, I'm happy to work with any specific business owner after today, if anybody needs any help there. But one of the key things we wanted to talk about as a baseline is really focusing around mandatory, doing something around furloughs. So we wanted to kind of start out by talking about furloughs, that when you think about a furlough, and this is when you are typically, what a business owner is trying to do is you're trying to hold that position for that employee for a period of time. Right now, some employers are saying, they don't give a time frame on how long the furlough is going to last, but they in essence are letting the person, they are no longer paying the person, or occasionally they might be paying that person a very reduced salary. I've actually run into a couple of organizations that pay still a very reduced salary for that employee. The one reason you possibly want to look at the option of furloughing employees is that the first thing is, when I think about it too, from Art mentioned culture. So if I think about too from a backdrop, and I think hopefully everybody on the session today will agree that the only competitive advantage that any organization, and I repeat, any organization has, is their culture. Every organization, that your product can be replicated, your product can be imitated, your professional services, value proposition, that can be replicated. The one thing that can't actually be replicated is going to be your culture. So if you think about that as kind of a backdrop statement, as I talk to you for the next couple of minutes. So one of the key things around furloughing, going back to furloughing, you keep the people, engaged with your organization to some extent. Obviously, this is going to create some level of financial hardship for them. But the beauty is, the one benefit you get out of furloughing in most situations is that you can allow the employee to stay on your benefits program. And that can be huge for organizations, because obviously going through something like this with COVID-19, that crisis going on right now with a pandemic, the last thing you want to do is have an employee who, you possibly wants to lose. They may be facing the situation where they're losing their health benefits coverage. Most health benefits brokers, for those of you that do offer healthcare benefits, they're going to run through the end of the month that person would be terminated. So if you go through a RIF, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But the benefit of furloughing is you actually, in most cases, you end up with the employer, you stay on the employer's benefits program. And quite often you could either, quite often, and companies will offer, they'll do a benefits program where 100% of the employee-only coverage for the benefits are covered by the employer. So in essence, they're going to be continuing to protect their coverage, and they also have the right, if they have a spouse or a family or kids on their program, they can also be able to maintain that level of coverage at some percentage level, or perhaps some cost for out-of-pocket expense for the employee. But this is one of those nice things to say. In essence, we're temporarily going to be letting you go, but this is not a permanent reduction in force or layoff. So that's one of the beauties of something around the furlough process. It creates some level of goodwill. And again, the other big thing that all of you know about, and again, depending on your industry, you know that just a few months ago, it's hard to believe, but for many, many years, going back several years into this, going back into probably 2015, all the way up through the end of last year, we were in a war for talent. And the talent, so not knowing, but I think I have a pretty good read on it, but when we think about it, we are really blessed to live in the state of Texas. But the DFW unemployment rate, for instance, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area has been around 3.5%. So that's almost virtually no unemployment. I'm sure Austin and Houston, very similar numbers. So when you think about it, the last thing you want to do is let go permanently of some of your employees that you fought tooth and nail to hire. And then now that things are becoming challenging from a cost perspective, you want to release employees on and have a mass exodus of employees. So I think one of the key things you have to remember about, especially as we get into any type of reductions, that you want to be very strategic before you let people go and you actually lay them off, because there is that war for talent, which is going to, let's knock on wood that will be back soon enough, within the next, maybe by the end of this year, we will be back in a situation where we may be having a war for talent. Also, the cost of hiring is huge. Just to bring on an average cost, so this is irregardless of if the person's an hourly employee, salaried employee, the average cost just to get the first person on your payroll on day one is about $5,000. That's all the interviewing, the job posting, all the time it takes to interview, your expenses to just surf through resumes. That's about $5,000 just to bring anybody on board with you on day one. So it's a huge time consuming activity. And that one of those things, when things do pick up, and hopefully there will be some sort of a tidal wave of activity when things pick up, that you really don't have the time to be looking at hiring a lot of folks if you'd let them go.
Artie, real quick, there is a question that came in, and it has to do
sure.
the different options for furloughing employees. Like, what are those?
Yeah, the different option for furloughing employees, the typical option is going to be, in some cases, the main option is whether you're going to decide to keep them on board at some sort of a reduced salary level. So in some cases, so it's really going to be, when you furlough somebody, you are typically going to be letting somebody go to where they're actually not going to be reporting back. They're not going to be reporting to work. And you actually have furloughed them for, and most companies don't put a time frame on it, but let's say now we're going to, let's again hope that we come back to work in about a month. So in quite a few cases, a person may have been furloughed for a month or 2 months. But the one thing you can do is, sometimes companies will furlough, but they will continue to pay some low level of cost or salary level for that employee. So it's typically going to be based on the percentage, how much you're going to pay that person during that furlough period, to try to keep them, to try to avoid that person to look for other opportunities outside and look at possibly leaving the organization. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Another thing you can possibly look at doing is you can also look at possibly broad-based pay reductions for your employees. And this is another situation you can look at too. And I know that some companies that I know personally, some companies are actually pulling this lever, if you will, or taking this tool out of their tool bag. And what you're looking at typically for your lower level employees, you're probably going to be looking at a pay cut. So you're going to continue to retain their services, continue to have them work their regular schedule, but you are going to be reducing their salary by X%, or even for hourly employees, possibly reducing their hourly wage by X%. You're typically going to see, what I find, and what I know most companies have worked through or have actually implemented now, that you're probably going to do on your lower end of your let's say salaried employees for this example, possibly you're going to do, let's say, a 10% pay cut. Whereas for maybe your senior level, so you do scaled, and a lot of times companies will scale it by what that person's W-2 income is. So let's say at $50,000 and below, the decrease in salary could be 10%. If you have more executive levels, let's say directors and VPs who make over $120,000, $150,000, you may actually do a broad-based pay cut to where you actually reduce pay by, let's say, 30% or even up to 50% for a set period of time while we work through an organization's reduction in revenue. And again, this is something that a lot of companies are doing broad-based, so they're not isolating one employee will get a pay cut, one employee won't. They're simply saying this is going to be across the board pay cuts that are going to be occurring. I also have heard of some companies, which actually one of my clients, the CEO, and a couple of the other C-level employees have actually they've decided to take no salary over the next couple of months until things improve. So that's another way when you look at it, depending on your employee size. Obviously, larger companies who maybe have 150 employees, 100 employees, 200 employees, 300 employees, when you start looking at doing these type of across the board pay cuts, you may actually see a very large cost savings by being able to enact something like that. You also, and quite often it maintains the morale within the organization. Of course, it's a little bit tough to take up front, but you may actually maintain morale versus some people being furloughed or other people being laid off. So again, from a cultural perspective, this may be a little bit of an easier pill to swallow. You're still getting work done, and many employees are still continuing. I work with quite a few companies in the construction industry, and right now in the DFW area, the construction industry is still considered an essential business. So for instance, I was at a concrete company yesterday. They're still working, and they're still staying very engaged. So for companies that are still working, they are still, they still have deadlines to meet and customer demands to fill. Another possible tool or lever in the toolkit you can actually take advantage of, that maybe not as thought of as often, is if a company offers a 401k matching program. So quite often a company may offer some sort of, a dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar for an employee 401k match. In several circumstances, this is going to be critical. If you do offer a 401k match, you definitely need to talk to your 401k broker about the feasibility of doing this. There are some situations where your 401k plan, you can't reduce the match because of the program it is. But quite often, and those are situations where quite often, again, based on the type of 401k you have structured, you can actually suspend the match for an indefinite period of time. And then as things improve, you can actually lever that. You can actually turn that switch back on to offer the 401k match again. And I know some companies do very generous matching programs, sometimes in the upwards of 4, 5, 6%. And again, that's another lever that, depending on how many people are actually involved in your 401k, that can create another pretty interesting lever to actually create some cost savings, which a lot of business owners don't think about that heavily. The last thing I wanted to talk about over the last couple of minutes for my talk is around the classical situation of laying off or riffing. So RIF, reduction in force, so that's what a RIF stands for, or a layoff. So I always recommend this again as a last resort, because but the beauty of right now, again, from a government perspective, one of the beauty is with some of the stimulus packages that have been done, there are some very heavy incentives that have been actually offered to persons who have been impacted by a layoff. So right now, for instance, there is in most states, so actually this is something broad-based, most of the states, on top of the existing package unemployment insurance that somebody would be able to receive, unemployment payment, there's actually a $600 per week incentive that is offered currently, that is offered for 13 weeks. So in Texas, unemployment benefits usually last for about 26 weeks. And there is just some discussion about possibly even extending that. But on top of your regular unemployment benefits for employees who are let go, there's also a $600 per week incentive that was part of the stimulus package that was offered, that the large stimulus package that's already been released, that came out probably about 3 weeks ago. But going back to the RIF, and if you do have to lay off people, really focus on, in every company, irregardless of your size, you have at least, every company has a lowest 10% of the workforce. And I just wanted to repeat in my notes I have in capital, every company has a low 10%. We all know who they are. They get some work done, but a lot of the work they do is poor quality. Their productivity level is lower. And so really be very strategic when you think about doing layoffs. If you have to do them, don't just think about this on a whim. Get your leadership team together and assemble a list. So if you have an organization that has 100 employees, what are your lowest 10%, 10 people who you could let go of, and this would probably have no major impact to your company. Start out right there. If you do performance reviews, which I recommend you do those at least quarterly, at least annually, but I prefer quarterly reviews, it should be very easy to figure out who your lowest performing employees are. Also look at before you think about that too, and doing any kind of a layoff, also think about departments, because some of you may actually be doing financials that are sophisticated enough, because in some cases, certain departments may be still very high growth and may not have been very impacted very heavily. So think about also by maybe being very strategic or surgical within a reduction. Think about a department, perhaps that's a lower profitability department, or the customer demand has greatly decreased in that department. That's a department you may want to actually impact, because you're going to say, when I look at my overall income statement, my balance sheet for this year, my forecast, one department may have been much more heavily impacted from a revenue perspective than another department. So again, be very strategic in the way that you look at, you might want to do more, have a greater impact in one department over another department if you have the financials, the sophistication in your financials to be able to do that kind of analysis. The last thing I would say on doing a reduction in force is that you really want to do everything you can. Every company has bottom performers, like I mentioned a minute or two ago. Every company has top performers. Make sure you do everything within your power to retain your top performing employees. And again, if you do reviews or if you do bonus structures that's performance based, then really be thinking about doing everything you can to protect your top performing employees, because they're the ones who actually drive the growth, they drive the productivity. They are the ones who are going to be driving your organization forward. And ultimately, this is the core of your company. So one of the key things you have to do is really make sure you retain your top performers during this type of a time. And again, be thinking about, again, as I mentioned earlier, just think about very heavily, if you do have to go through, unfortunately, a reduction in workforce where you do release people, do that in a very thoughtful way, a very strategic way. If you can offer a small severance package for those employees, great. I know that's even if you offer 2-week severance, that's a great, offering them something to try to do whatever you can to try to offer, you want to treat them the same way you treat a current employee. So do whatever you can to offer them some sort of, even if it's a small severance package, see if you can do that. And that's, I would say, something very favorable to do if you had to exit anybody.
Mark,
that,
thank you thank you very much. I appreciate all of that wonderful information. I think there are a couple of questions. We have just about a minute to go through those. If we don't get to all of the questions, and certainly for our audience, please reach out to Mark. His contact information is inside the chat window, and we'll also provide that at the end of the meeting. So Dennis, were there a couple of questions in the chat? Okay, maybe we lost Dennis. I will read them.
Nope, sorry, I was on.
Okay.
So we do have a couple, and one that's kind of tactical, which I think you can answer relatively quickly. Do you have that $600 that is on top of the standard benefit? Is that something that people have to apply for separately, or is it automatic?
It's automatic. That's something that's actually done through the stimulus package that was released.
Okay. And then there are a couple more questions in here, which I think we could send to you that would probably require a little bit more thought and thoughtful response. So we'll get those out.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate
you.
that. And Art, thank you for inviting Mark to come talk to us today. So I am going to strategically in the background give our next speaker co-host rights while I read her bio. All right. Trisha incoming. So we are named twins, just so that no one makes a mistake. I actually have 2 Trisha iPads on this call, and then we have Trisha Burita. So Trisha is the managing attorney for the Burita Law Group, PLLC, and has been practicing as a licensed attorney for 14.5 years in the areas of business and employment law all over the state of Texas, with offices in downtown Houston and League City. She strives to bring a creative and collaborative approach to her clients that create a lasting relationship. She has represented anywhere from small local businesses to large national corporations in employment matters with the Texas Workforce Commission, Equal Employment Opportunity, OFCCP, or Department of Labor and Consulting matters, investigations related to employees, and administrative matters and litigation. She regularly provides speeches and training on employment law or business law matters to corporate management, trade organizations, business employer groups, and chambers of commerce in the Houston and surrounding areas. I give you Miss Trisha Burita.
Thank you, Trisha. And it always drives me crazy when we do stuff together because people are always like, Trisha this, Trisha that, and it's not me. I love it though. Yes, thank you for having me, Dennis and Trisha, and I know all the other people that participated in this from Focal Point. So very interesting. I've enjoyed listening to all the speakers. So I guess I'm last. I'm bringing in the caboose here, I guess, on the end of the seminar. But I promise not to make it too brutal to listen to some legal stuff. But let me go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see. I have just a couple slides. Of course, legal stuff is already kind of hard to muck through, so maybe this will sort of make it a little easier. You might have already heard a lot of stuff about the Paid Sick Leave Act. Here we go. But I thought maybe looking at these slides together, we could go through and I have a scenario for you to sort of make it easier. So, all right. Let's see. This is just my information. Of course, I'm located in Houston with Trisha and Dennis. I have an office in League City in downtown Houston. I have a disclaimer. I told Trisha, I've been doing a lot of webinars as a guest, and I just make that clear. You're not my client by attending this seminar, so I have to do that really and explain that. Of course, these laws are changing. I would say that we've had a lot of development, just like Jimmy was speaking about with the bank issues and the CARES Act. The developments related to and the guidance we've received from the Department of Labor and as well as from the IRS and the EEOC and the and OSHA laws that came out this week, of course, more guidance and regulations. So be careful with, when you're listening to this, just know that it's not a replacement for, possibly where you are at in your business and what guidance you may need specifically because of the changing laws every day. All right, so I have this scenario that kind of should sort of get us sort of just briefly talking about kind of some of the issues related to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. If you're not familiar with that, you've somehow luckily been spared, but most everyone else saw it kind of come out. It came out about the week before, on March 18th, and it was signed into law by President Trump, and then it came into effect on April 1st, 2020. And it sort of came out before the CARES Act. So after the CARES Act came out, there was a lot of interest in figuring out how to get the loans, people calling CPAs and bankers like Jimmy. And so some of the stuff that was coming out maybe was missed by some of the employers and business owners that came out afterwards. So this is just kind of some scenarios to sort of talk about what exactly is out there now that COVID-19 is more in the workplace, or you will be maybe experiencing it in your workforce, and how to handle those situations and what it looks like with actually dealing with a real life scenario of the FFCRA. So if you look up in here, I have it listed that Paul has a painting company called Paul's Painting Company. He has 30 employees. Paul's an essential business, but he's never had employees telework before. And when the FFCRA got passed, he had several employees approach him requesting leave. Here we go. Bob, his most experienced painter, wanted to do some administrative work from home, even though he generally supervises other employees and he never does administrative work. He does offer a note from a doctor saying that because he's 65 years old and he has a heart condition, that he needs to work from home. What should Paul do? Now, I can tell you that I've had at least 5 clients call me with this exact scenario. So if you're an employer or a business owner and you have employees, this is a situation that you may see if you haven't already seen it, as to what you think Paul should do in this scenario. Does anyone have any comments on that? I don't know if you want to throw something up into the chat or in the Q&A. But do you think that Paul should let Bob go ahead and, take leave? Do you think it should be paid leave? Or you think you should try to find some telework for him, even though he doesn't normally telework? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think we're all scared of that situation.
All right, okay, all right.
Which I think that under normal circumstances, I would allow him to telework if he can. That would be, I remember when I had 3 Roto-Rooter franchises, and when somebody got hurt, we offered them light duty, but that was bringing in the office. So if teleworking is an option, I think that, that should be at least be considered.
Yeah, I could see that.
I would struggle with the idea that he doesn't do administrative work. Sounds like he's an active supervisor. Finding him the proper work from home.
Not right now.
Well, but it's simply a matter of restructuring seeing if you can restructure his job. Because I had a guy that drove a truck for me, but he hurt his back, and so we brought him in, and he did typing and filing, and answered phones and things of that nature. So it would be to see what's available where you can restructure his job and keep him moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comment, Chris, and Tricia too. Yeah, I think that the real question is, right, where you're looking at that, you're going, well, what if I don't have administrative work for Bob? What do I do in this situation? What is the law expecting me to do? It is sort of obviously a new situation. Obviously you don't, or what do you want Paul to do? You don't want Bob to get sick, right, with COVID-19 and be exposed. And he does have a doctor's note. So, where should the employer go with this? And is FFCRA play into all of this? So really what you're looking at in this situation is what the doctor's note actually says, right? Because if the doctor's note is specifically saying that he quarantined, then you may have to look at the FFCRA. And I'm going to go over those guidelines here. Look at this. Your 6 potential reasons for emergency paid sick leave. And then the red reason, number 5, also applies to Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. Some employers have gone to whether number 2 applies. Is the employee been advised by the healthcare provider to self-quarantine for COVID-19? So in the scenario I gave you, the note says that he has a heart condition and that he can work from home. It's not about self-quarantining in this particular situation. So what it's really about is trying to figure out, okay, under the ADA, if you have over 15 employees, the Americans with Disabilities Act, you need to provide some type of accommodation to Bob. And like Chris was saying, hey, should I find him some light work? And then Trisha's saying, wait a minute, he's a supervisor. Like, he can't supervise from home, right? The painters, maybe he could, but who knows what kind of paint job you'd end up getting, right? So, and these are good questions and exactly where you should be thinking of. So I think in the particular situation you're in, the guidance that we've gotten from the ADA is that they want you to be very flexible right now through the COVID-19 pandemic. And so just as if you were looking for an accommodation in a normal situation, you would have to prove undue hardship if you were not going to provide the accommodation. So while I think Chris and Tricia both make a good point, I think if you do not have, if they said actually you could do, like Chris was kind of even suggesting possibly like a temporary type work situation. If you could find some temporary work for him at home, then that may be the way to do it. If that's even possible. If that's not possible at all, then maybe look at a situation where you're providing him unpaid leave, okay? Because he doesn't fall under quarantine as the FFCRA would apply for giving paid leave, but unpaid leave would be considered an accommodation nowadays for this exact scenario the EEOC said. And this is during the pandemic rules. So normally providing telework or requiring someone to be able to stay home under this situation would not apply. But the new pandemic rules under the EEOC kind of changed that. So thanks, Chris and Tricia, for weighing in on that. Number 2, Clara, his HR office manager, came into work and saw the DOL poster for the FFCRA. If you're not familiar with this, the DOL poster should be posted and all employees should have it up All employers should have it up if the FFCRA applies to you, which is employers that have employees less than 500 employees. I think even if you're trying to claim an exemption or an election, you may want to have it up anyway. The DOL poster is free. It's on their website and it's in Spanish as well. But anyway, Claire the office manager saw the DOL poster listing the reasons for potentially paid leave. She tells Paul, I have a 5-year-old child at home. My mom can help watch him on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I need to take off work on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays so that I can take care of him. Is that okay? What do y'all think? You think Paul should go ahead and let Clara take the take time off to work only on Tuesdays and Thursdays? Does she qualify for some type of paid leave now under the FFCRA? Anyone want to gander a guess here?
I don't think so. I don't think he has to do that. I don't think Claire, the office manager, has to do that.
And why is that?
Well, because it's what is this for a business over or under 15?
This is for a business with 30 employees. Paul has 30 employees.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I missed that. Wouldn't that fall into the category of an unreasonable request and an undue burden on the business owner?
You mean like under the FFCRA or under the Disability Act?
Yes. Because it's not a disability. She has other options.
Okay, what are her other options?
Put the child in daycare.
What if the daycare is closed because of COVID-19?
But daycares aren't closed, at least not in Austin. They're still open. They're an essential service.
So I would interject being flexible, right? Those are the words that you used in the last scenario. So I think, do we, head in the flexible direction?
Well, I think you should be flexible. I don't think you have to be.
Trisha Burrito, what keeps us out of jail?
What'd you say, Dennis?
I said, what's the answer that keeps us out of jail? Because clearly,
yeah. So the answer is here. You can see on the slide, and number 5: the employee is caring for a son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed, or the child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 reasons. So if her daycare is closed, then she would be able to ask for this leave. But in this situation, the person is actually her mom. And under the FFCRA, a child care provider is mom. And so if the daycare is not available and mom's not available, then she can ask for this leave. And the leave is allowed intermittently like that, not in a block leave. Like she doesn't have to take it, the whole week. She can take it like she requested. So in this situation, you would give Claire the leave and it would be paid at 2/3 a rate under the FFCRA. For number 5, you'd start with the emergency paid sick leave for the first 2 weeks and then go on. And I mentioned here, what if mom gets sick and she can no longer care for the child and Claire loses all care provider, then she can take the full up to 12 weeks of leave and be paid at 2/3 her regular rate.
Now Tricia, is that specific? Is it different because of the COVID-19 situation? Well, let's just say COVID-19 didn't exist right now and I was the person in this scenario and the daycare itself was unavailable because of it was some sort of egregious legal allegation and somebody came in and shut it down. So I no longer have daycare. Is it still, it's not my fault that the daycare is not available. There's no COVID-19, but essentially I've lost my daycare anyway. Does this still apply in the same way?
So it really depends. In the independent question, Dennis, if FMLA, which is over 50 employees, applied to the employer and there was some qualifying reason to take care of the child, then FMLA, regular FMLA could apply. Just normally having a daycare close, if the employee needed to care for the child related to some sort of, sickness or other reason that qualified under the FMLA, then that might they would be able to be eligible to get regular unpaid FMLA. In the COVID-19 situation, which the FFCRA gives all these qualifying reasons, this runs through December 31st, 2020. So if the care provider, for instance, mom is no longer available due to COVID-19, like she gets sick, like the grandmother, or I know you were saying in Dallas, Chris, a lot of them, the childcare places haven't closed. A lot of them have closed here. And so if you have proof that a childcare place that you were using closed because of COVID-19, you would be eligible for this type of leave all the way through now to December 31st, 2020.
So the closure is COVID-19. This particular law that goes through December 31st, it's specific to COVID-19. If they close for any other reason, it may not apply, but you should get advice then.
Right. It would have to qualify under regular FMLA leave, not the FFCRA.
Yeah.
And then just the third scenario here, Chris calls Paul that he's experiencing sickness from a sore throat, so he thinks he has COVID-19. Can he just stay home for the 2 weeks of paid sick leave? He doesn't want to get anyone sick. Does anyone have just a quick response on whether they think Chris can just stay home and take the 2 weeks paid sick leave?
Doesn't he have to have a doctor's diagnosis?
Yeah, I would say go get a test.
Yeah.
Number 3 is key. He has to be seeking a medical diagnosis. So seeking a medical diagnosis. So if he's trying to get tested or if he is seeking to talk to a doctor to see if he has COVID-19. If he just wants to stay home and take the 2 weeks, then that's not going to work. So
Hey, Trish, I have a question about that. So, and I have to preface this by saying that my wife is in the medical field. She's a physician assistant. And early on, I know, and in some cases, I know that there's not enough tests to go around, although that's changing. What if you had somebody who was trying to get tested and the doctor declined to test them? Is that still seeking medical diagnosis? And would that qualify?
yeah, they're pretty liberal with the seeking a medical diagnosis. They're also saying that because of the issues with the unavailability because of healthcare providers, potentially because of the COVID-19 spikes, that there is going to be some limits to employees being able to get the medical diagnosis and documentation they normally would be able to get. So you have to be pretty liberal with that. Now, they can't just say that they're going to be seeking home. You as an employer can ask them to go get tested, right? You don't want them returning to work unless that you know that they've been tested and either they're positive or negative and quarantined for the appropriate amount of time. So a good question though, Chris.
Would you recommend them, the employer asking the employee for a doctor's note stating that the doctor refused to test them at this time?
For what purpose?
Well, so again, just for you have that documentation as the employer, basically, okay, the doctor refused to test you. Can I get a note saying that the doctor refused to test you just for my files, just so I have it? So that qualifies as seeking medical diagnosis instead of taking the employee's word for it.
Oh, I mean, you can, they're not requiring it. Like I said, if the DOL, the Department of Labor is saying you have to be pretty liberal as an employer. So yeah, I mean, if they can get documentation that, you know, they went to one of these drive-through testing areas and they tried to get tested, or they sought medical assistance and or refused the test, sure, they can get that documentation and you can ask for it. You have to be careful about requiring it because, again, if the doctor's like, I don't have time for it, the DOL has said, you know, that's going to happen here. So you have to be a little careful about that. But they can't just stay home. So, and if they test negative, they lose their qualifying reason on number 3, and you can expect for them to come back. You can require them to come back to work. And then you would only pay them for the period of time that they were off. So say they tested negative, they were only off for 40 hours. They would then bank the other 40 hours of the emergency paid sick leave. So how much time do I have left, Tricia?
We're pretty close. There's about 45 seconds left of talk time.
Okay, I didn't want to go over. So I know there's a lot to kind of understand about all this. There's a tax provision credit, dollar for dollar, when you do end up giving paid sick leave. And there's caps on that. So don't pay over the caps or you won't get the, I mean, you can pay over the caps, but they're, you know, it's pretty clear that you won't get the tax credit for it. So consult with your CPA on that. There's a small business exemption that if you have under 50 employees and you meet the qualifying reasons, you may be able to take it. But I can tell you a lot of businesses are confused about this, and you know, not everybody is able to meet these requirements. So if you're under 50 employees, you should explore whether or not you are allowed to take it based on your particular situation. And then there's a healthcare provider credit. So If you want any more information, here's my contact here. Key to this and getting the tax credits and everything is documentation. So I will say, like with my consulting clients, I've crafted a policy and the forms that the employee needs to fill out. You should be doing that if you're an employer, and you should. I did it as a package for my consulting clients. It is something though that if you're not documenting, you're going to have trouble getting the tax credits and everything for this information. So I'll leave it with that. Sorry, Trisha and Dennis.
No, not at all. And there was one question, I think, Dennis, in the chat box from the very first scenario, or interjection. Maybe.
And it was an amplifying comment that says, I believe you also have to consider the consequences of not making accommodations, such as getting sued should Bob get sick or die as a result.
Yeah, okay, so thank you for, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, of course.
Trisha, thank you very much. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you don't follow the law, you can be sued under the FLSA or the FMLA if you don't provide the accommodations under the ADA as well. So,
yeah, this is really, really important information, and I appreciate all 4 of our speakers being with us today. I'm going to share my screen one more time. Does anybody have any questions for Trisha Burita? Not Trisha Stetzel. Shoot, not bad.
If I can, just a question on these tax credits. When I hear the word tax credit, my assumption is when I file my 2020 taxes, costs I was reimbursed, legitimately reimbursed, will count as credits against my taxes for that reporting year. Is that the right way to think about it, Tricia?
I am not a CPA, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to defer that to your CPA to give you the information related to tax credits. But it's supposed to be an immediate tax credit that you can take right off. So, but I'm not going to probably advise on that just because I stay out of the tax realm, and I work closely with CPAs on helping the employers make sure they get the tax credits right.
That's fair. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much to all of our speakers today. Artie, Jim, Mark, Trisha, you guys brought some really, really great information forward to our participants. Thank you to all of the participants who were here today to listen to this current and relevant information. Please, as a disclaimer, know that in a couple of these areas, things are changing very quickly. It can be by the day, by the hour. So please check back with your professional, or you can certainly check with the professionals that we put in front of you today if you have questions. I've put their either their web address or their email address inside the slide here. They all also, I asked them all to put their contact information into the chat window. So if you need to scroll back down to get their contact information, you're more than welcome to reach out to them individually. I would also like to give a shout out to the full leadership network. I'm gonna make this smaller so we can actually see it. Marcia Fulton, who's in McKinney, Texas. Chris Gay, thank you for being here today and bringing Artie with you. Chris is in Austin. Art is in Dallas. Art Lockheed, thank you for bringing Mark with you today. I appreciate that. Steve Lowry, who is our area rep, is on the call with us today. Paul Mueller is on. He's in Houston as well. Eddie Ross, I don't know if he was able to make it today, but he's in the Dallas area. Mark Steele in Colleyville. Dennis Stetzel and Trisha Stetzel. We're both here in the League City area. Austin Tannett in Houston, and Dave Watkins in Houston as well. You can always go to focalpointcoaching.com and look up in your area if you happen to be outside of Texas. Or in a place that you don't see someone listed on this slide here. Thank you to everyone. If you're a coach and you're on the call, please wave. TLN leadership. Yeah, good. Thank you guys.